Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the 365 in the Word podcast. This is a podcast of Capital City Christian Church in Jefferson City, Missouri. My name is Elijah Odell. I'm joined by my friends Frank Garinger and Josh Crossland. We are all three on the pastoral team here at Capital City. And here at Capital City, we are a church on mission to encounter Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to love like Jesus. And one of the ways that we are focused on doing these three things is through an initiative called 365 in the Word. As a church family, we are intentionally spending time with God in His Word each day in 2026 using the Daily Bible as our guide. So today's podcast is week 26, episode 26. We are looking at the content covered in the Daily Bible from June 25th to July 2nd, and we are halfway through our year.
Yes.
Round of applause. Halfway through.
Halfway.
Which is kind of crazy.
It is kind of crazy.
Halfway through. I heard a humorous story the other day from my father about getting somewhere halfway through, so I want to tell you guys this story.
Okay.
My dad was talking about how when he was younger, he had a friend, and they were swimming across the lake, and they made it to the halfway point, and his friend was exhausted. And so his friend just swam back. And my dad swam the other side, and, his friend wanted to conserve his energy, and so he didn't swim the whole expanse of the lake. He just swam halfway, and then he swam back. If you didn't catch that, I don't know what to tell you. But I have a question for you guys this week. If the first half of this reading commitment, this church-wide reading commitment that we have had, is a theme song, has a theme song, and the second half needs a hype song, something to get us through the second half, what are the two tracks that you would select for these two? I'll go first. I think the first half is a song called A Little Bit of Everything by Dawes. And the reason is because in the Old Testament so far, we've had some of the heroes of the faith. I mean, just the most faithful, the most upright, and some of the most exciting stories. We've had Judges and Exodus, some almost superhero level events where this person's incredibly wise and this one's strong and this one's fast. And so you got some really great moments. You also have maybe some of the worst stories as far as boring goes. This is a boring area. You got to really study it to find some of the gold nuggets in there. And then we've also seen some of the most evil things happen. I mean, biblical history in the Old Testament, there's some of the worst, most heinous acts of history that have happened as well. So A Little Bit of Everything is the song that I would choose for the Old Testament. It's one of my favorite songs. Shout out to my wife. She loves that song. And then the second half, if we were to have a hype song, I would choose Moving On Up, which is the theme of The Jeffersons, which is a TV show that I probably shouldn't even know about. But it's a great show, and the lyrics of that song, Moving On Up to the east side to a deluxe apartment in the sky. And the east side, deluxe apartment, none of that really is connected. But moving on up, I do think it only gets better from here, which I've said a couple times on the podcast before. But I do think the closer we get to Jesus, the closer we get to the church era, it only gets better. It only gets, I think, easier to digest in some ways, but also it only gets richer in the layers and levels that there is, I think, to contemplate and reflect on.
You can't get the richness without being
all the context, 100%.
Yeah.
It only goes up from here, though, in the sense that we're only getting higher on the mountain of knowledge we have accumulated, and so we need that foundation before. So what are your guys' two tracks? Some explanation, I think, is warranted. So what are your two tracks, Josh?
I think the Old Testament one I was thinking of, I'm trying to think of the name of the song. Let me see if I can get it pulled up here. But I'm thinking of the line,
As you pull that up. Oh.
Right.
What's it?
Yeah.
I will survive.
Oh.
That might be what it's called, the... First I was afraid, I was petrified. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a great one.
That's what first came to my mind.
Yeah.
And then the New Testament was Help by the Beatles. Or not New Testament, but the second half. Second half, being help!
Help get me through this.
Help me get through this.
Help us on the way.
Yeah.
And, we're approaching this period of quietness, right, from the prophets. We're getting, as we approach into the New Testament, and it's
the intertestamental period
right.
where they're all their silence.
The last 400 years of silence.
Yeah.
I need somebody.
Help, not just anybody. That's a good song.
That's good.
So we might need to link all these songs in the description so they can have a Bible reading soundtrack.
Yes. There was two. I'm gonna go with. I felt like the Old Testament. It's like this. It's building the tension, right? But there's just a lot of bad stuff that goes down. And so I was trying to think, what is the song and the song by Johnny Cash called "Hurt" came to mind.
I hurt
myself today.
today.
And of like everybody in the Old Testament is doing that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't like it doesn't like necessarily resolve. So it's kind of like leading like that tension of no
the resolution
resolve.
is later.
Yeah. I also thought of the worship song "Do It Again."
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
So,
been
like,
faithful.
Yeah, I've seen you move. You move the mountains. I believe I'll see you do it again. And maybe that's also one that could be helpful for maybe that's my New Testament one. I was thinking about the Disney song from the Tiana movie, "Almost There," for the "Almost There."
Oh,
for the
yeah,
New
yeah.
Testament. But maybe do it again.
I haven't seen that one.
You haven't seen that one? Yeah, maybe do it again would be a good one. Like, man, we've seen God. You're seeing God move in certain ways, even though there's some strange things going on in the New Testament. But He's going to do it again, and there's this hopeful kind of like pointing forward to what's coming. That's fine.
I think I almost chose that one song, 500 Miles.
I would.
Yeah, because everybody walks in the Old Testament, but I was like, that's pretty surface level connection. And then I also thought of the song from the TV show Big Time Rush, which was almost halfway there.
Okay.
Because they wanted to title the song Halfway There, and then the guy was like, you're not halfway there. Trust me, there's a long way to go. So they started calling it Almost Halfway There. And
Yeah, because we are halfway.
All you Gen Zers.
We are halfway through our reading.
but we're not halfway through the separations. The New Testament's a lot smaller. We don't actually get to the New Testament until September or something.
Yeah, we've got a lot of Old Testament to go.
So we still have a good chunk of Old Testament to go. But I would say this may be my favorite read through of the Old Testament I might have ever done.
All right.
I've really enjoyed
like that.
the harmony of how we've been reading it with the
chronological.
because I've done a
Very
chronological
different.
of like when they were written, but the whole book.
Yeah.
And so this is neat for the kings and the different prophets to be connected and.
It's definitely clearer.
Yeah.
Timeline wise, it's clearer this way. I think, than anything I've ever read.
Yeah. Well, I'm not Bobby, and so I don't have like a great reflection. I wanted to know what your songs were. There's no lesson in it.
No connection.
Make a playlist and listen to these. That's
Let
your
us know what
application.
your songs are.
Yes.
Yeah. Send them.
Drop it
in
into
or
the comments.
drop it in
Send it in
comments.
the email.
What would you describe the
Yeah.
first half of our reading in a song, and then what's the second half?
Everybody's
Or
just
maybe
everybody's just
your
putting songs like
experience.
pain, suffering. That's the name of the song. Yeah.
Your experience of having to try to get through the first half,
Right? Yeah.
and what's left.
And those of you that just started, you can put your songs like, I don't even know, better late than never, something like that. But anyway, we this last week we have dove into some more of the prophets, probably some of the strongest messianic prophecies that we've been in this whole time. Mm-hmm. And so, Frank, would you be cool with opening us up today with some of what you jumped in, especially with those Messiah prophecies?
Yeah. Kind of looking. There's some beautiful ways to hopeful pictures looking forward for a lot of the people. But I want to focus in on just two verses really today from Isaiah chapter 7 in our reading this week. Kind of sits in a really tense, fearful moment for the nation of Judah. So really quickly, some context. King Ahaz is basically staring down this political crisis, and instead of trusting God, he begins to lean on some human alliances, especially with Assyria. But God, through the prophet Isaiah, offers Ahaz a sign, but Ahaz refuses. He refuses the sign from God, and essentially he masks his unbelief with what maybe we could call a fake humility. And so you've got this moment where God is basically saying through Isaiah, you've exhausted the people with your leadership, and now you're testing God, and Isaiah rejects God's sort of plan. But God says, you know what? Even though you're rejecting me, I am going to act anyway. and I am going to do something. And it's the famous text where Isaiah says, a child will be born and his name will be Emmanuel. And so you have this glimpse into the future birth of Jesus. And there's a few things that are happening in these couple of verses that I just think are important for us to remember. And they are this. Number one, God is present even when we reject him, even when we choose to not trust him. And Ahaz was choosing not to trust God by rejecting the message of Isaiah the prophet. Ahaz had the opportunity to trust God, but chose his own control and his own decisions of making these alliances with the nation of Assyria regardless. But even though he did that, God still said, you know what? I'm still going to be with my people. And obviously the word Emmanuel means God with us. And I'm still going to make sure my presence is with my people. And even when we don't respond perfectly, or when we choose fear or anxiety instead of trust in God, God's promise is still, I will be with you. Even when we maybe are in a position of pushing back, like our failures don't cancel out God's faithfulness. Like God is still faithful even through our failures, and even though we've moved, God hasn't moved. And so that was a hopeful message that stood out to me. And along with that is the idea that God's plans move forward even if we resist them. And Ahaz refused the sign, but God gives one anyway. And it kind of is like this: God's purposes do not depend on perfect human cooperation. If we've seen anything in the Old Testament, is that humans don't perfectly cooperate with God's sovereign plan. You look at our own life, none of us have perfectly cooperated with God's divine plan in our life. So, but this truth that God is not stuck because of our hesitation or our doubt or even our disobedience. We're invited, obviously, to participate in what God's doing, but God's mission is going to move forward no matter what. Yeah. And even though you have these ups and downs of the nation of Israel and Judah during this time, that did not keep God's plan for the Messiah, for Emmanuel, to come into the world. And there's just this, I don't know, I just find this hope in that reality that my failure doesn't stop God's faithfulness. And God's much bigger. God's much bigger than that. And then lastly, it's just this truth that in these verses, when Isaiah prophesies that Emmanuel's going to come, it's going to be God with us, that ultimately God's presence is the ultimate answer that we need. We don't need immediate relief. We don't need a particular physical kind of blessing or action. What we need God's presence with us. And this sign that Isaiah was giving to the king was not simply a sign of any kind of political deliverance. It pointed to something deeper, that God's presence will be with his people. And oftentimes I know I want God to fix certain situations around me. And there is this reality that I have to hold on to, that God's promise is himself in the situation.
Yeah.
That maybe the situation is not going to just be magically fixed, but God is with me even when I'm walking through this. And peace doesn't come from everything externally changing around me, but it comes from me knowing that God is with me in the midst of it. Yeah. And that's the ultimate promise. Emmanuel, God with us. And so when fear kind of pushes us to maybe want to control even more our circumstances, we've got to remember that God's greatest promise is his presence with us. And in the midst of this very kind of tense, fearful moment for the nation of Judah, there's this glimmer of hope that Emmanuel is coming. And no matter how the people responded, God was faithful to that plan of bringing the Messiah into the world. And therefore, we get to, again, live on the other side of that, experiencing the presence of God with us through the power of his Holy Spirit. And ultimately, that is the ultimate answer. Yeah. The ultimate answer is God with us. Yeah. And that's what we need to remember and what we need to lean on.
Something that I've been reflecting on just in the last few weeks has been our tendency when we are in trouble or we're anxious or we're going through something, it's always to produce something, which we got to produce some results. We gotta do something. We have to make something happen. And how often we see in Scripture how much more God prioritizes presence over production.
Yeah.
And so because that's our instinctual reaction, that's our instinctual expectation of God, like you were saying, and in reality, the better promise, the better answer is the one that he's going to give, which is just his presence with us and through it. And that presence is so much more significant now even than other moments of history. We have the Holy Spirit indwelling within us, which is a kind of presence that no other generation of humanity has been blessed with except those that exist in the age of the church like us. So that's pretty special. But well, one of the things that I jumped into the prophets this week as well, into the prophet Micah, which there is a cool link between the prophet Micah and Isaiah, which I'll get to in just a moment. But Micah was a country prophet from the agrarian foothills known as the Shephelah, which I don't know what area around Jefferson City would be known as the Shephelah. What the
foothills? Yeah,
maybe Holt Summit or something. But what that agrarian place would be. But for all of the, maybe critiques of the city elites, these urban elites of his day, he was a very accomplished, intelligent writer, and there were some really cool things that he did in his book of prophecy. So his book is, I would say, a blistering critique of those urban elites in the capitals of Jerusalem and Samaria. But he was not just like this country bumpkin who didn't know what was going on and just was angry because people were successful or something like that. He was very astute in his observations, and of course they were divine as well. They were from God. So in Micah 1:10-15, the prophet foretells the devastating route that the Assyrian army will take as it marches toward Jerusalem. And in English, it kind of just reads like a boring list of ancient, unpronounceable towns. But in Hebrew, it is dark wordplay, and it's kind of a masterpiece of it. It's what's known as paronomasia, and it's when the literal meaning of each town's name is twisted to be their judgment. So it's a pun about their impending destruction. So it's the ancient equivalent of saying that the residents of Waterbury will drown, and that the residents of Grand Rapids will be swept away.
Yeah.
So in Beth Leafra, this means house of dust, and Micah writes, in Beth Leafra, roll yourselves in the dust. In Shaphir, which means beautiful or pleasant, Micah says, pass on your way, inhabitants of Shaphir, in nakedness and shame. So it's nakedness versus beauty. In Akzib, which means deception or disappointment, Micah writes that the houses of Akzib will be a deception to the kings of Israel. In Maroth, which means bitter, Micah writes, the inhabitants of Maroth, bitter, wait anxiously for good. They will taste only bitterness because disaster has come down. Yes, which is actually connected to another story in the Old Testament when Moses strikes the rock and then the water is called bitter, and so they call it Mara. As well as Ruth.
Yeah. Naomi changes her name.
Yeah, because she's a bitter woman. So Micah 4:3 also, this is a really neat, this is inscribed outside of the United Nations building, and they attribute it to Micah.
In New York?
It's this passage. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. This is Micah 4:3.
Interesting. I didn't know that was at the...
Yeah. I don't know if I actually don't know where it's at, but I've seen a picture of it when I was kind of doing some research on this. It is on the United Nations building. So there's some cool intertextual nuance. This is where it's connected to Isaiah. So the exact same oracle appears word for word in the book of Isaiah in 2:4. And scholars still debate who quoted whom. I mean, you can see in our chronological timeline, they're really close by as far as the timeline goes. So they still debated who is quoting who, or if they just both were quoting a popular saying of the day that then became prophecy. But the most fascinating through line, I think, is something we've also seen, which is the book of Joel. So in the book of Joel in 3:10, Joel takes this famous comforting verse and it's inverted, which Joel, I think, is a predecessor. So maybe Isaiah and Micah inverted it. But one way or another, he says, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, and let the weak say, I am a warrior. So we've just finished beating our plowshares into swords. Now we're going to beat our swords back into plowshares, which the image of this is take your weapons of war and turn them into weapons of cultivation. Not weapons at all, tools. But Joel is saying, take your instruments of passivity and turn them into instruments of defense. So they're not like opposites. They do cooperate with each other. They do complement each other. But I think this shows how dynamic the prophetic tradition is for Israel. For Micah, the ultimate vision of God's kingdom in his time and place was absolute peace and demilitarization of the people. But for Joel, who was facing an immediate existential threat, the people needed to turn their farming tools back into weapons because those farming tools were representative of their passivity when it came to their spiritual lives. So I think that's kind of neat that at different times the message needs to be a different thing. And maybe some of us are in a season where our plowshares need to be turned into swords, and we need to be on better and stricter defense, and maybe some others of us need to pursue peace and be instruments of cultivation. But then the last thing I wanted to talk about is Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8 is one of the most famous verses in the Hebrew Bible, often quoted as a beautiful summary of what ethical religion is. We have a friend, Micah Oder, and he is 6'7", unfortunately. 6'7" inches.
Micah 6'7".
He did a sermon once about how he always wanted to be Micah 6'8", and he is Micah 6'7". But in actuality, we would not understand Micah 6:8 without verses 1 through 7.
Sure.
But before we get there, I just want to talk about this little section, because when you pull back the layers of its literary, historical, linguistic context, this passage, Micah 6:8, transformed this very simple inspirational quote into a very subversive critique of what ancient society was all about. So the wealthy elites were crushing the poor, and they were the exact same people that were bringing extravagant sacrifices to the temple to appease God. And Micah's message is that God rejects this religious theater. He doesn't want their money. He doesn't want their rituals. He wants an economic system that is rooted in fairness. Like in the words of Amos, he wants righteousness to roll down like a river. He wants justice to roll down like a river. And he wants a people who walk carefully and modestly with him. So Micah 6:8 cannot be understood, like I said, without Micah 6:7 and Micah 6:1 through 6. In this chapter, God initiates what's called a reeb, which spelled reeb, though, is a formal covenant lawsuit against Israel. And he calls the mountains and the foundations in verse 1 to act as the jury. It says, witness as witnesses. When confronted with their guilt, the people of Israel respond in verses 6 and 7 like a defendant that is frantically trying to buy off a judge. They're trying to buy time for themselves, and so they escalate their settlement to offer absurd, panic-driven heights. We'll give you not just calves, not just young calves, year-old calves. We'll give you thousands of rams. We'll give you 10,000 rivers of olive oil, and then my own firstborn child. It just continues to escalate. And this reveals a very transactional, very pagan, very worldly and societal norm mindset of the day. What price can I pay that will appease this deity? Because they were operating off of the way that every other person in the ancient world served their God. But God's response in 6:8 cuts completely through all of this, because he doesn't want an escalating bribe. He wants a transformed society. He wants them to live like the prophet Hosea that Bobby talked about last week. I don't want sacrifices. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So, obviously we see the sacrificial system. God wants sacrifices, but not just because he loves goats dying. He wants, it's about the heart behind it. Always, it's about the heart behind it. That's why the sacrificial system was so prescribed the way it was, because there was real intentionality. There was real heart behind that. But there's one unique little word study. The phrase translated walk humbly, which is hatznia lechet in Hebrew, contains a linguistic gem, which is
and this is in the section where it says what God really wants is for us to act justly,
love mercy,
and
walk humbly. That's right. To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. And actually, what it says is, it says true. Now I can't remember the exact phrasing of 6:8, but I was working on memorizing it this morning. And
he has shown you what is good.
What is good? Yeah. Yes. What is good?
And what does the Lord require?
What does the Lord require of you? Yeah, and it is to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So walk humbly, that last one, the root word is zana, and it is highly unusual. As a verb, it is once used. It's a hapax legomenon, and it means this is the only time that it appears in the entire Hebrew Bible as a verb. The only other appearance is in the Proverbs, where it says, with the humble is wisdom, but it's an adjective. So here, humility is the verb, to walk humbly. Or it's an adverb, to walk humbly. And rather than humility in the modern psychological sense, when we think of humility in the modern day, we think of kind of a peaceful, low self-esteem. We think of ourselves less, not think less of ourselves, but think of ourselves less. But Zana is very action-oriented, and it implies walking circumspectly or walking very carefully, walking modestly. And it is the exact opposite of this flashy and performative, rivers of oil and firstborn child kind of religion that Israel just tried to offer God in verse 7. And so from the very beginning, this was not, he doesn't want lip service, and he also doesn't want you to just, he doesn't want sacrifices the way these flashy sacrifices are, but he also doesn't want you to say, I am so weak and I am so small and I'm the worst, and then not change the way you live. He wants you to walk humbly. He wants you to live humbly, and that's why it is translated walk humbly, because it's actually one word hyphenated, but it means to live humbly, not just to be humble, not just be a humble person, but for your actions to be humble. And I think that's really powerful, and I think the direct application to our lives is super easy. God wants us to be authentic in our relationship and religion of Him. So that was what I got into this week. But Josh, what were you studying? What fascinated you this week?
Well, so last week we talked about what does it look like or feel like to be the bearer of bad news, right? We kind of went over that a little bit as these prophets are having to go deliver this terrible news. I kind of want to look at the way both Isaiah and Micah are both kind of these watchmen, right? Yeah. They're seeing their nations fall apart before it happens. They're seeing this thing happen. And the idea of the watchman is the one who would stand at the wall and watch for the enemy coming. These guys knew through divine, action that God was showing them that the enemy's coming, their nations are going to be destroyed, things are happening, and they have to bear the burden of knowing all of this and warning the people. And so it's just wild to me that this is the way God chose. This is the way God chose to communicate with His people. You have a whole nation that the Assyrians are getting ready to come in and take over, and you got this whole nation coming against a whole nother nation, and He's like, hey, you.
One person.
This dude right here. I want everyone to listen to this guy. And it blows me away that is.
Well, that's interesting, because that gives you some insight into sort of the psyche of a prophet. Because it wasn't they chose it. God chose them.
Right.
Yeah.
And the burden of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the burden of having to speak truth to power. The burden of having to, like you said, like foresee in a way.
They weren't glamorous jobs.
No. And
they were called to live so radically differently, and then also the things that they had to say. It was never good news.
Well, and
it was never good news.
And like when you learn about the prophets, growing up, or when you're first learning about the Bible, you almost have this glorified perspective of these guys, right? They are holy, chosen men of God, right? Who come and deliver theological lightning bolts against the nation.
They are the wild, bright men.
Right, And really, if you think about it, these are just normal dudes that God was like, you're the one that I need to go and
what
talk.
a lonely
job. And think of them as being citizens of this nation, knowing your country, your neighbors, your people are going to go through this. And this agony of this is coming and I feel powerless, even though
He has all the information.
You have all the information. You've been given the gift from God to know this is happening, and the burden of telling people, and also feeling like I can't make them do anything.
I think that's why so much of the prophecy was probably spoken through tears. I mean, Jeremiah is called the weeping prophet, but I think they all were like, you guys don't get it. They're spitting out their prophecy as they're crying at the same time, because it's such vivid, like you said, divine conversation they were having.
Yeah, I mean, let's see here. So Isaiah delivers this heavy prophecy against Moab, early on and said in this reading and says, and Judah's, let's see, Moab, Judah's frequent enemy, right? His response, my heart cries out over Moab. I weep as Jazer weeps for the vines of Sibmah. Sorry, I'm terrible at pronunciation. I drench you with tears. Like just this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just heart-wrenching what they're having to go through.
Yeah.
And so these guys are literally going through trauma.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine the physical, emotional trauma that they're going through trying to persuade, right? Because God's given them all this information, but yet also doesn't give them the power to control the nation.
Right. He doesn't make the
Right?
kings the prophets.
He's just a voice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? And so, that there's this psychological trauma, but there's also this physical trauma. Isaiah 21, right in the middle of this week's reading, the prophet describes the toll of receiving these visions. And he says, at this my body is racked with pain. Pangs seize me like those of a woman in labor.
Yeah.
I'm staggered by what I hear.
That was that today's reading or yesterday's reading? That was just recently. 'Cause yeah.
It's Isaiah 21.
Yeah. It was just recently.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like I can't imagine if it's happening in a dream. Is it at night when he's getting these visions? Like, is he waking up in the middle of the night and just feeling all of this? Or is it like he's struck in the middle of the day while he's doing things with visions and all of a sudden he's like, oh,
There's no real good time.
Yeah. Like
to have some labor pains.
Yeah, right. So anyway.
Jeez.
And then
we all know what that's like.
Yeah.
Of course.
And then imagine the kind of dealing with the reaction of having to deliver this news.
Yeah. Well, there's that proverb, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. How ugly is everything of a person who brings bad news. I mean, the kings hated these guys so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That does bring it into perspective. I think, too, we'll get into a little bit more of Isaiah's story. There's still a lot more to read from Isaiah.
Yeah.
But one
big book.
One thing that God asked Isaiah to do, and I always come back to, I'm like, maybe I'm not cut out to be a prophet.
Yeah.
He tells Isaiah you have to walk around for 3 years.
Right.
In the buff.
Yeah.
And just because you are a symbol of Israel and Israel has exposed themselves to the world, so go ahead, expose yourself. That's minimal compared to what he asked Hosea to do.
Right.
But it wasn't just the words, it was everything. Their whole lifestyle was just...
They embodied the message.
Yeah, they were the illustration. They were the word picture.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy. Well, we don't have any questions that have been written in this week for the podcast. But as always, you can always write to us at nextsteps@capitalcitychristian.net or reach out to us on a weekend. You just make sure you put the podcast in the heading of any email that you write to us that has a question for the podcast. And we're looking forward to the second half of this awesome endeavor of ours.
Stay strong.
Yeah, please do. Stay strong because it does only go up from here. We have built such an awesome community of people reading and growing and reflecting together, and it only gets better. And if you haven't started yet, or if you've just started, I want to encourage you. It does only get better, and halfway through is just as good of a time to start. So we are excited that you are here joining along with us as well. Whether you have been here from day one or if today is day one, we are very excited about that. So thank you guys. Thank you, Josh, Frank, for being here this week for the podcast, and we will see you next week.